Now, before we get started, I should offer up a little disclaimer. Despite the title of this video, I do not think that The Last of Us is an objectively bad game, nor do I think that it's poorly made. Most of my problems come with some of the core aspects of the gameplay and the presentation of the story. Beyond that, I think this game looks amazing for a late PS3, early PS4 game. I think the performance by Trey Baker is truly one for the books. The music is phenomenal, and overall I think the game is plenty enjoyable. I've played through it twice, and I rarely ever finish a game that I'm not enjoying, much less play it a second time. So before you rush to the comments to call me trash or stupid for not liking your favorite game of the generation, or even your favorite game of all time, be aware that I actually do quite like this game. Now let's get into it. The Last of Us is seen by many as not only Naughty Dog's first foray into the more mature demographic of gaming, but more as proof that they were capable of it in the first place. And prove it they did. For anyone who missed the days of Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter, this likely signaled that those days would never return. They'd fully embraced the more narrative-based, character-driven stories that the generation's hardware almost demanded. However, they were willing to go beyond the action-adventure that was Uncharted and delve into a somber, melancholy, depressing post-apocalypse and tell a story about hopelessness, helplessness, family, and human resilience. I respect that about this game. Although I can't say that I wouldn't want to Crash 5 or even an Uncharted kart racer. Uncarded, anyone? In all seriousness, this game is surprisingly restrained and largely avoiding violence and gore for the sake of it. Its mature post-apocalyptic setting is just that, a setting. It's a backdrop that they use to tell the story and get us acquainted with these characters. I will say that some of the more action-oriented sequences feel somewhat out of place, but I'll come back to that. For now, let's talk about this game's tone. The opening sequence of the game surrounding Joel's daughter Sarah has a lot to do and not very much time to do it. Not only do you have to start caring about her and her relationship with her father, which it does for you by showing that she scraped up some money to buy him a watch for his birthday and that they like to banter with each other. It also has to introduce the infection in an organic way, which in my opinion is done perfectly, as one of the neighbors who's been infected breaks into the house and Joel has to shoot him. However, in this section, if you explore before you progress the plot, then you find out that there's been an outbreak that the government doesn't seem to be able to contain. From here, the game hits breakneck speeds as Joel's brother Tommy shows up for you to all try to escape the city, only to see that mass hysteria has set in. You find yourself trapped in locked-down traffic. People have abandoned their cars and are running for their lives. People are getting hurt, and there's nothing you can do for them, because right now nothing is more important than survival. This doesn't sit well with Sarah. Things keep moving and you end up in a car wreck that Sarah gets injured in and Joel has to start carrying her. This is when it seems like control has been shifted from one character to another, but in reality, it's been stripped from the player entirely. And I don't mean that as a bad thing at all. Of course, this section is on rails as the game very clearly intends for you to go to a certain place so that a certain thing happens. However, when you're in the moment and caught up in the chaos of the scene, you don't even notice it. All you want to do is escape, because that's what the characters want to do. However, you find yourself outside the perimeter of the city and faced with an armed guard with orders to shoot. Powerless to do anything, Joel tries to block his daughter from as many shots as possible, but she still ends up succumbing to her wounds. The scene is gripping, heart-wrenching, and shocking, as well as representative of the world we would live in if chaos were to just erupt for silence. Not entirely unlike what's happening in the real world in some places. The scene is powerful, emotional, and still breaks my heart every time I see it, and is one of the only times I've ever cried at a video game. After this, there's a 20-year time skip and Joel is a very different man. His tragedy has hardened him and he values survival and self-preservation over personal attachments, something that is completely understandable given his experiences. It's strongly suggested that he's had to do questionable, maybe even unforgivable things to that end. From here though, I won't do so much of a plot breakdown of the game, I'll just be going on about how some of the things in the game impacted me as far as the story goes. We all know that the main goal of the story is to take this young girl named Ellie to the Fireflies a pretty good distance away because they have doctors who might know how to use her to develop a cure for the infection, seeing as she is immune. Ellie, a girl who's had no family her whole life, and Joel, a man whose family was taken from him, it's obvious to see where this dynamic is inevitably headed, especially with how much time Joel spends trying to distance her, as he takes her from place to place trying to pawn off the responsibility. First to Tess, then Bill, then ultimately Tommy again, who's found himself a bit of a stronghold in the past years. Honestly though, these moments in the game I think are its strong suits. The moments where you and Ellie are just traveling from one spot to another, avoiding hostile survivors or hordes of infected, or even having to be especially careful around a group of clickers as not to get killed in one hit. These moments of gameplay not only give plenty of banter for the characters in order to actually characterize them, but they also reinforce what the game should have focused on. stealth-oriented, survival-based gameplay. However, the game sometimes can't help itself, so you get caught in a trap and have to shoot infected while hanging upside down with an ironically endless ammo supply. Or here's a sudden sniping section. Or here's a part where you have to run for your life from a group of armed enemies shooting at you. These aspects of the game almost always feel out of place, with one exception, which I will get to. And even in the parts where you're just exploring, this game is cursed with a gameplay model of go here, grab a thing you can climb on and bring it back. I swear to you, I have no concrete number on how many boxes, carts, pieces of driftwood, ladders, and so on you have to retrieve and climb on top of, as well as how many doors only open halfway and you have to hold it so that Ellie can slide under. It's still a problem in some games today, and I understand that it's a way to hide loading screens, but after the 20th one in half as many hours, it becomes very obnoxious. Doubling back to the gunplay in this game, though, it feels archaic at times, and at other times it feels like it wasn't even play-tested. There's not a single gun apart from the revolver, in my opinion, that actually feels fun to use. Maybe that was intentional, I don't care, it's not fun. Luckily though, what this game lacks in polish, it makes up for in tone and atmosphere. This game is exceptionally well designed as far as post-apocalypses go. There's a very good balance between a lifeless world and a world where there are constantly things moving around in the shadows. You never feel too safe in one place for very long. Another good aspect of the design is the different types of infected. I won't go too far into it because there's just not that many, but the idea that the longer someone's been sick, the more grotesque they become is brilliant, as well as the sections where infectious spores contaminate the air and a gas mask must be worn. There are so many details that help make this world feel so well realized, and one of them being the pair of brothers Sam and Henry. I couldn't talk about this game's characters and not mention them. They represent the flaws in the dynamic between Joel and Ellie very well. They've been surviving for years off of Henry's instincts, which unfortunately means that for Sam, only being 13 years old, he hasn't had much time to be a kid. In fact, Henry won't even let him keep a toy he found at an abandoned store because it's inessential and it'll take up room in his backpack that he could use for supplies. Henry and Joel are both neglectful of the children that they oversee, just in different ways, and it's very interesting to see. After a very poorly designed sniping sequence, Sam reveals to Ellie that he's been infected and that he's scared to tell his brother about it. However, he finds out anyway and is forced to kill him before turning the weapon on himself. After this horrifying scene, we're graced with another time skip, so I suppose I should talk about these chapters that the game is divided into. The game's chapters are broken up by seasons of the year, which helps tell the story by trimming out countless hours of walking from one state to another, as this is a tale of travelers. However, it also comes with a pretty major drawback in that it cuts out what would be hours of character development, and I'll show you what I mean. One of the biggest moments in the game is when you arrive at Tommy's camp. It's there that you find out that Joel wants to hand Ellie over to him and have him deliver her the rest of the way. Tommy refuses and confronts Joel about his treatment of her the entire time, calling him out for seeing too much of Sara in her. After this argument, Ellie runs away, having heard that Joel wants to get rid of her. Following that, you have to chase her, deal with a halfway decent defense type sequence, and the two of them have a verbal fight over how Joel treats her and how she doesn't want to be handed off from one person to another like she isn't human. After this section, there is a skip from summer to fall, and you end up at a college in Colorado where you're supposed to be able to find these fireflies. The conversations between the characters feel awkward, as there's clearly still tension therein. However, you can tell that it hasn't been resolved, so you would reasonably expect that you'd see that resolution take place. You'd be dead wrong, however. At this college, you discover that those fireflies all ended up infected because of their mishandling of test subjects, and that Salt Lake City is the real final destination. After that, you're ambushed and Joel is gravely injured. Ellie escapes with him and he loses consciousness. After that, another time skip happens, and you play as Ellie in the winter, where she's essentially a bedside attendant to Joel while he's comatose. You have a brief hunting segment, and after a while, encounter a man named David, chillingly played by Nolan North. More time passes and you find out that David is a cannibal and intends to eat Ellie, at the very least. This is followed by a pretty satisfying chase sequence and an interesting boss fight. During this time, Joel wakes up and uses his spider sense to determine that Ellie's in danger, and somehow just kind of ends up starting out in the right direction. And in an equally satisfying sequence, he finds her as she's cleaving David's face in. He takes this moment to comfort her and even goes so far as to call her baby girl, as he did with Sara in the scene where she's taken from him. And then after yet another skip, they're just palling around, getting along swimmingly like they've been friends for months, which they probably have been, but we didn't see an ounce of that. We saw black screens with text. The last few encounters between them have basically been, I don't want you because I'm scared to get close. Here's how football works. It's okay, baby girl. Hey, look at that giraffe. Very important, very major, huge character work is being completely skipped over for the sake of getting to the next part. It's ridiculous and never ceases to be frustrating. Of course, we know that they care deeply for each other, but it's because the story is skipping to the part where they're already made that clear. It feels like they have an easy button. However, this isn't my biggest issue. We're coming to that here in just a second. When you finally do arrive at Salt Lake City, by some chain of events, Ellie ends up nearly drowning. As Joel tries to save her and give her CPR, he's knocked out by the very fireflies you're looking for. Isn't that convenient? When he wakes up, you're told by Marlene, who was supervising Ellie at the beginning of the game, that Ellie's in surgery, where they'll be trying to extract the cordyceps from her and devising her that way. It is then, and only then, that you're told that cordyceps spreads all over the brain and that she'll be killed in the process of trying to harvest this cure. It's never stated how the virus spreads, there's no hint that she might not survive. You and Joel find out at the worst possible time. Just because something is a surprise doesn't mean that it's good, or that you should be happy about it. If I came up to you at work and just poured maple syrup all over the floor, that'd be pretty surprising, wouldn't it? And how would you feel about it? Maybe I could just get away with it by saying, see, I subverted your expectations. The game could have at least told the audience in a conversation between Tommy and someone or Marlene and someone earlier in the game. That way Joel doesn't know, but the player does. And there's a dissonance from what you have to do and what you want to do. You can spend the entire third act of the game dreading the eventuality of what will happen when you do finally reach Salt Lake City and what Joel's gonna do when he finds out. But no, shock value and gut punches. After this, the game breaks its own rules in the best way possible, and that's use a fully automatic assault rifle against the enemy fireflies on your way to go find Ellie before they operate on her and save her life. This is the hardest section in the game, and in my opinion is an expertly crafted gauntlet to end the journey you've had up to this point. I mean, to be fair, this is the final confrontation. And when you arrive to save Ellie, one of the surgeons refuses to let you take her and holds up a scalpel to you to try to protect her. You have to kill him to take her. The game won't move on unless you do. But did you know that you can spare the other two? If you didn't know, and you killed them anyway, it says a lot about how you played the game. But if you let them live, it says just as much. There's no right or wrong way to play it, it just depends on how you want Joel to be remembered. Regardless, when you take her, you are defenseless and have to carry her to safety. Trust me, this does not mean that you can't die. They'll just take her from you and kill you anyway. I learned that less than ideally. After this, Ellie wakes up in the backseat of a truck Joel likely stole from somebody, and he's crafted an entire story about how she wasn't the only one immune and yada yada yada. The point is that he was so unwilling to let her go that he had to create an entire plot just to justify why he took her back from the Fireflies. Maybe he's so wrapped up in it that he himself believes it, who knows. Maybe if she'd stayed with them, they would have botched it, based on the fact that a scientist in Colorado got himself infected by a monkey. There's no telling, and in the end, after they've clearly gotten as close as possible, Ellie confronts him and tells him to swear that he was being honest about what happened. He obliges, and Ellie lets it go. Obviously, she knows he's lying, but in all, what can be done about it at this point? It's in the past, and a long time has gone by since then. As I said at the start, I don't think this game is bad at all, not the slightest. It would have to be considerably worse and come down quite a few notches for me to want to say that it actually is bad and not just less than stellar in some places. I feel that the story could have been much stronger overall if they didn't cut so many corners and skip forward in time so frequently and so far, months at a time. That's kind of egregious. Unfortunately though, these flaws are strong enough to keep me from being too excited for the sequel. I'll probably play it in the future, but I'm in no rush as of right now. But if you play it, or are watching this video in the future and have already played it, let me know what you thought of it. I'd love to open the conversation up to counterpoints if you want to talk about things in a civil manner, if you disagreed with things that I said in this video, if you just think that I missed some things and you want to give me other ideas to talk about, that's cool too. And before I leave, I'd like to thank my director of photography patron, Lindsay Ropiak. I really hope I said that name right. If you'd like to support the channel on Patreon, the link will be in the description, and I will see you guys next time.